Good morning and welcome to Steve Wraith's True Crime Podcast. A little different interview today. I've got Sonia Poulton on. Good morning, Sonia.
Good morning, Steve.
Big fan of Sonia's work. Seen her many times on my good friend Sean Atwood's podcasts, and that's where I first stumbled across Sonia's work. I was then referred to a YouTube channel, and the link is below for you to go and visit that. I would urge anybody who's sitting at home doing nothing over the course of being furloughed or whatever to pop on Sonia Poulton's YouTube channel. It's well worth a watch. Top of the list is Paedophiles in Parliament. Well worth a watch. Fantastic documentary, well put together. Certainly an eye opener. Other stuff on there, of course, well worth a watch. The Business of Cancer, which was done last year. Madeleine McCann, of course, which will come to public relations and saving reputations, which is great. And Grenfell Tower, 1 year on, a crime against humanity. That's just a little taster, but believe you me, there is a lot more on there. And, it's well worth hitting the subscribe button to Sonia's channel and getting on there. But Sonia, welcome to the show. We'll get questions, I'm sure, as people who are sitting and watching. I just want to go back, to how you started out. You started out in music, which is obviously something close to my heart as a music promoter. One of the many things I do. Tell us a little bit about what you did in the music world.
Well, I was a music journalist for about 12 years. Let me go back a little bit. So I left my home in Gloucestershire when I was 18, moved to big city of London. I wanted to be involved in the music and entertainment industry in some way because I just loved that. And I initially started working for like a firm of chartered accountants, and then I stayed there for like 2 years. And then I went to work on the front door of the Empire in Leicester Square and got really involved in clubbing and just loved my, West End clubbing and just raving and everything. And then I saw an advert in the local newspaper which wanted an editorial assistant. It was in for 17 local newspapers in Central and West London. So I thought, I'm going to give that a shot. So I went for the interview, got the job. And my job was basically to open the mail, make coffee badly because I can't make tea or coffee. I'm sorry, apologise about that. So I did that for about 6 months. And the editor, Ray Fox, basically mentored me and said, "Do you know what? I'm going to put you in charge of the entertainments page." And he did, and he trained me up, and I was incredibly fortunate to be taken under his wing. And I stayed there for about 2.5, 3 years. Went to work for this company called Miro, Music Industry Research Organisation, which was a new organisation to inform the music industry of who was recording, who was touring, all the stuff that I was really interested in. Oh, my battery is just playing up here. I'm sorry, Steve. Might have to
don't worry.
in a minute. We might have to move location slightly. Don't worry.
Go for it. Go for it.
And okay, so basically it's live, isn't it? It's very live.
Yeah.
And so basically from that, I then saw an advert in Echoes, which was a Black Music Weekly. Just plugging this in. I'm sorry.
Oh, Sonia, we've lost you. We've lost the signal, Sonia, sadly. If you might be able to get back to where you were, that would be great.
Right. What I need to do... Just bear with me. Let me take us closer to this router. I'm so sorry, everybody. This is this is as live as it gets, frankly.
Well, to be fair, Sonia, you did try to get it on your computer, but technology beat you. So don't worry about it. It's not your fault. It's not your fault. But we managed to resurrect it with the phone. So we got there in the end, but don't worry about it. And no harm done. So yeah, continue.
Excellent. So basically, from that, I started working for Echoes, and that was it for me. My world opened up, and it was like old school hip hop. So it was Public Enemy, who just revolutionized my idea of what was going on in the world in many perspectives, in many respects. And so I toured with, I interviewed Public Enemy about 7 times. Interviewed Snoop Dogg. I was one of the last journalists to interview the Notorious Big. I went to South Central LA and hung out with Ice Cube, and he took me around NWA's old haunts, and I interviewed NWA. I was just so blessed, Steve.
What was that like, Sonia? Because NWA had a big influence on my life. I wasn't really into Public Enemy as much. I found that was too heavy. I think what I liked about NWA was just the lyrics, what they sang. I felt Eazy-E was fantastic. I thought, I mean, I've got all the albums. I've got Eazy-E's solo album. I could probably, I'm not going to do it now, but I'd probably recite quite a few of the lyrics. But yeah, I mean, look, they were a major influence on me, musical influence on me, introduced me to that kind of music. What were they like in person?
Well, I mean, often not as you might imagine, to be honest with you. Like Eazy-E, I just loved. I got on brilliantly with. We became actually quite good friends. And when he told me that he had HIV and AIDS, that it was very, very upsetting. And he initially was the very first person who ever told me about Suge Knight, for example, and said, "Watch out, listen out for this name. This is a troublemaker. This is a problematic person." And he's come in between me and Dre and all of this kind of stuff. And of course, anybody who knows hip hop and knows that era of hip hop, Suge Knight is a name to know, and obviously been implicated allegedly in both Tupac and Biggie's murders. It's actually more to do with the police. But then Suge was very involved with the police, but that's a whole other story. But yeah, oftentimes these artists were just completely different, like, away from the hype. And also, don't forget, Steve, one of the reasons why I gravitated so much towards it is my heart naturally sits with injustices. And a lot of what was going on with hip hop was talking very, very serious social injustice taking place in the world. But on top of that, we were up against other things, because as hip hop was coming out, I don't know if you remember the climate at the time, but like the media was so racist towards hip hop artists, so incredibly racist. And it was just hard to get anything published. That's why you needed specialist magazines to do it. And of course, once that changed, it became mainstream. And then suddenly you have all these white kids pretending they're black and everything. It changes it all completely, and it did, but at the time it was like evolution that was taking place. It was very exciting to be. I was incredibly fortunate. I was trusted, but that's because I was never a hack, in the same way as I'm not a hack now. I actually, it wasn't good enough for me to tell a story. I needed to know that, we'll go on to this later, very much my thrust for life now is going after people who are corrupt, unpacking corruptions and cover-ups and things like that. But my thing always, when I'm dealing with people in terms of a story, is if they're in any way trusting me, or they're not a villain, then I like to leave them in a better shape than I found them, right? So that also includes artists. So some of those hip hop artists were up against incredible prejudice. So I wanted to try and explain what was happening, culturally, rather than just all these, white, very middle class people in media who had no clue what was going on, just write them off. I wanted to explain there was a reason why this language appeared so alien, but actually it was a reflection of the society that these artists were talking about. So, and it led me, obviously, to what I'm doing now, because that was very much about the underdog, about injustice, about highlighting problems within society. So, yeah, but it was a great time. I'm so fortunate, incredibly fortunate.
You also did the tour of the War Child exhibition with David Bowie. What was that like?
Well, again, amazing. And because I didn't ever approach it as a sort of journalist who'd been put through or, journalism school and university and everything. I was coming very much from a working class background. I hadn't at that point had any education at all. It was only later in life that I took a psychology degree. But at that point, really, everything about me has always been learned experience. I came from quite an impoverished background. I was orphaned by the time I was 11. My mum died. My father had already left the home. My brothers and sisters raised me. Incredibly tight family unit. Very blessed and fortunate to have them. But things weren't easy. And so, and honestly, I'm glad. And I don't mean that in any kind of perverse way, but our life, our history, our childhood makes us who we are. And one of the reasons that I'm able to lock into and be empathetic to very sensitive, difficult situations is because of my background. But so like the War Child exhibition was a perfect example, because there were all of these very Oxford, Cambridge educated journalists waiting in a queue. Have you got me completely, or have I gone off here a bit? So waiting in a queue to talk to David Bowie. You got me, good. They were all waiting in a queue to talk to David Bowie, but it was David Bowie, and David Bowie made the choice, and he walked straight towards me. I'll show you the exhibition. I said, let's do it. I did what a minor tour was at the time. All these educated people, and part of the exhibition included like a minor tour, which is obviously a Greek myth, half man, half horse. I didn't even know what it was. I just didn't have that sort of education. But he loved that. He loved that. You know, it was basically real. That I knew about life, and I didn't necessarily know about Greek mythology, but I did know about life, and we just clicked, and it was absolutely brilliant. And after he'd showed me around the entire exhibition, and then he went off with other journalists, I was talking to some friends, and he came back and he said, could he get me a drink? And he got me and my friend around a drink. Can you imagine? Like David Bowie going, was the bar getting you drinks, and he was super cool. And you know, because and grace people feel that, and so that people can behave naturally around me, and they either like that or they don't, and he seemed to like it. So yeah, all good.
Huge names to be working with in the music industry, and you know, you changed.
I don't know if it's frozen or something.
I can still hear you, Sonia. So just you know, you can keep going if you're happy to keep going. It's it isn't the greatest reception where you are. It has to be said. Where you were previously probably worked out a little bit better. But if you need to stay near the router just to carry on, we can bear with you. You know, it's just a picture that's dropping off. The music side of things. Go on, Sonia.
I'm literally I'm now right in front of Virgin's fastest fibre broadband, right, literally sitting in front of the router. I'm not quite sure what. I'm sorry. I wish I could have got this up on my desktop. It would have been a much better picture.
Yes,
sorry,
yeah. Oh, don't worry, it's still good. We're still getting there. We've still got plenty of people watching. Bravo Mo says, Sonia, what has been your best interview or documentary?
Oh gosh, I couldn't say about my best interview, and it would be difficult to say about my best document. All means something individually. The reason that I made the mechanical entries was because I felt there were so many problems to the abduction theory and mainstream media, which I and push the envelope as much as I can, but there's only so far you can push it with the McCann story as one example. And so I was fortunate I got together with some people who were able to supply the equipment, and we filmed it and we got it done, and we independently released 2 documentaries. And that gave me a great deal of satisfaction, because I believe the Madeleine McCann case to be one of our biggest cover-ups. And I'm secret of the fact that I have lots and lots of issues with initial abduction story, that the 9 people who were there, 6 of whom were doctors, including obviously Kate and Jerry McCann. I believe that the story doesn't stand up to scrutiny, that I struggle to believe that doctors would night after night leave young children alone on their own. And of course, you know, hypothetically, they have to have had the neglect story. Children were left on their own, otherwise there couldn't have been an abduction. But I had a lot with that. I've had a lot of problems with the official narrative ever since. I've clashed with people in media who aren't prepared to ask questions. So in terms of like what has been my best, I would have to say to a certain degree have to do with the Madeleine McCann work, just because of it is a small child who is yet to have justice, in my opinion. The other thing report that has given me a great deal of pleasure, just to see it come to files in Parliament mentioned. Thank you. Peter in Parliament was really set around, well, it's placed in a historic context as well as a modern day context. And it was after Jimmy Savile came out in 2012 and said, not Jimmy Savile came out, rather, all the revelations came out about Jimmy Savile in 2012. And that's when they started to look more into who been associated with. Well, of course, we knew that Jimmy Savile was not just, but Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher as one example. He'd had great influence around parliamentary royal circles. So we wanted to make pedophiles in Parliament because we felt that there was so much unexamined about basically the last 30, maybe even 40 years in Parliament, where people seem to have just slipped under the radar, even though there were lots and lots and lots of accusations about them, whether that was Lord Janner to do with children's homes in Leicester, or Leon Britton, Home Secretary, now dead, and nothing seemed to be been done. And in fact, it was only last week that we've had our first proper parliamentary conviction, and that was with former Labour MP Eric Joyce, who has now been convicted of making and possess a film just under a minute long featuring approximately 7 children, the oldest being about 7, the youngest being about 12 months, being raped. And that was a Labour MP, Eric Joyce, and this stuff is hard and horrible to count, but we must to attempt to stop it. But he's really, and there have been others in Parliament who have got away, and I didn't like that, and that upset me greatly because I've met lots of survivors who have been hurt and damaged by this. And the problem is, Steve, is some people can't heal unless they get some acknowledgement about what has taken place with them, how they've been harmed. And our system does not allow examination of the establishment, members of the establishment. So paedophiles in Parliament basically tackled that. We've got a number of police in there who are whistleblowing about what they saw, what they witnessed. It really is just a sort of big overview, as well as with the detail about what's taking place in Parliament, the use has taken place, and how hardly any evidence for it. So that'd be pleasure in terms of finally putting people could see what had taken place, not the content of it. There's nothing pleasurable about the content to me, other than attempting to get some justice for the people who still haven't.
Yeah, great stuff. Stephen Taylor asks a question on the screen there. He says, could you ask Sonia why she thinks the McCanns get so much protection from the British authorities?
Oh, that off slightly. Could she ask Sonia why she thinks the McCanns
get so much protection from the British authorities?
Not hearing it.
Oh, so it's...
Oh, well,
Hi,
they've
Steve.
got so much protection. Yeah. Excellent question.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, very good question, of course, because it's the excellent question. It's the big question, which would explain so much. Let's not forget that after Madeleine went missing in 2007, that was one of the biggest Portuguese police history, where obviously she was reported missing. There's now been 3 countries, 3 police forces involved. Obviously, there's been parliamentary backup. Gordon Brown rang Kate and Jerry McCann to personally offer his support. Now, Steve, I'm not being funny, but one child missing every 5 minutes. What set them apart? Well, we have to ask, of course. So we do know for a fact that she had been involved with a number of parliamentary boards, including one called COMER, which was to do with energy. And on that board was also Gordon Brown's brother. It was to Madeleine go missing. But I think there were as well, Steve, and that was, I think, Tony Blair, who was about 28 days away from no longer being Prime Minister and would be replaced by Gordon Brown. I think that they saw the McCanns as basically useful, people that they could use for certain things that they wanted to do. And one of the things that Tony had set out to do and was unable to do was have this cross-border cooperation where everybody's DNA would be kept. So normally, obviously, people's DNA is usually kept for criminal reasons, or, usually those sort of reasons, obviously, now when it is often to a large, but not always. They wanted everybody's, right? They wanted everybody's in some sort of European bank. And Kate and Jerry McCann were very useful for that, because what they started saying, and one of the famous quotes from Jerry was about how if they'd have had such a system in Portugal, then Madeleine might be safer. So you can see how they're able to use the McCanns. So the McCanns then started touring the European Parliament, asking for this system, for the Amber Alert to be extended, which would also include this cross-border cooperation. And it was a number of issues like that where politicians saw them as very useful to be able to use. They were white, middle-class doctors, all of these sort of status symbols. I don't consider them status symbols, but status symbols that the establishment wanted to use. And don't forget, after that, Kate and Jerry McCann worked very hard to become public figures. Kate became a ambassador for missing people. I mean, sorry, you go on holiday with 3 children, you come back with 2, and you're given the job of an ambassador of missing people. Talk about taking the piss. That infuriated a lot of people. Jerry became a spokesman for Hacked Off with Hugh Grant and various other people who have a beef with the media and wanted to shut down the media and censor us. So very problematic roles these 2 people were taking on, were protected in all number of ways because they became very friendly with these people in the establishment. They became friendly with Clement Freud, became friendly with Gordon Brown up to a certain point. They became David Steele, used to be in the Lord David Steele, who hid the truth about Cyril Smith being a paedophile and had to admit it recently because the child abuse inquiry called him out. Right. So they started, and Clement Freud, who was, alleged to be a paedophile as well. So they were people who were not questionable, but were powerful, So, you have to start to deduce, why was this? What was it about them?
Yeah.
Interesting stuff. And this is why the case fascinates people, Steve, because there are so many unanswered questions. Yeah.
Yeah, very interesting. Sonia, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say this is the end of part 1. If you're okay, just so you can get to your computer, I think we'll do the second half as a pre-record. I really don't want to have the same internet issues when we're talking about your new documentary. So if you're okay, we'll set the second part up on Zoom and we'll share that on the internet as part 2, if that's all right with you.
Yes. So what do I need to do?
If I'll send you a link to Zoom and we'll do part 2 on Zoom.
I can't hear at all.
Okay, guys, what I'll do is I'll take Sonia out of that conversation. I'm going to do part 2 on Zoom and I'll upload it ASAP.